Hi guys, it's Sandy. Have you noticed that you can see my face and not just hear my voice? I'm so proud of myself that if you saw me walking down the street today, you would notice my strut, and I'm carrying my strength mug. See, I'm using both hands because I have tripods. And I just want to say I'm so grateful to have gone back to work. As you know, if you follow Prairie Path Books at all, I am a lawyer again. A law firm needed what I know how to do. And so after 15 years, I'm practicing law again. It turns out I had a lot of tech to catch up on. And because of that, it was painful, but I'm so grateful to the greatest law firm in the world to being patient with me. And I've learned to do a lot of things, and you can too. A lot of times people, when I ask, hey, would you ever want to connect via Zoom? Sometimes snowy days make you not want to come out to our events. And people think they don't want to and they can't. I'm here to tell you, you can, and I will actually help you, because if I can do it, anybody can. So I'm excited about this because I can be alone and in a quiet place, but still you can see the book covers. Before I used to hold my camera, which was just not very appealing, I think. So I'm talking today about something I've mentioned to y'all before, which is favorites. In our survey, you said by far Prairie Path Book favorites is what you come to us for, and I really get it. But then, of course, my brain started going down the rabbit hole of what is a favorite anyway? And of course, that's a personal question. And so I started kind of mapping it out, and I will share you this with you at some point. But basically, I'm looking at, is it a location that draws you? Is it the characters? Is it an era? Do you prefer dystopian or historical or right now? Are you outcome driven? Do you really want to feel satisfied in the end? Do you want to be pleased? Or are you happy with inconclusive? Like, tomorrow is another day, as they say. So the author, do you follow an author no matter what? I tend to follow authors I really love and what they say about other books. That means a lot to me, especially if the author quoting, praising a book is not an author that does that very, very often. Then I value the words even more. Pacing. Are you a pacing person? Like you want a page turn as fast as possible? Or do you like to really dwell? You don't care if you're still on page 5. You love the sentences. You love the tone and the mode of the pacing. Or is it your takeaway? I think this is something that I'm going to develop more as I develop my chart. Because there are people who want something that's conversation worthy, that they can talk to people, they immediately read it and they say, I want to talk to somebody about this. This is really on my mind now. And as I think about it more and more, I think I want to hear what other people think. So conversation worthy is a big one. And some people like to read the newest thing, the thing they're proud to say they are reading right now. And that's okay too. So I'm going to sort of give examples of this. And I would say by far my favorite location is a rural setting. And I don't know why, because I've never really lived in one, but there's something about, I guess, the pacing, the writers that tends to attract, and how I feel when I'm reading. Plus, number one, I think for me, the reason I read is I can connect with people or a place or an era that I don't know myself already. And I can sort of feel how other people live their life by the quality of the writing. So that for me is number one, what I look for. And so I'm going to take you through some rural books that I'm really excited about right now. I began to become aware of Ronald Blythe, who wrote Akenfield to capture a generation of the town, very small. It's actually called Portrait of an English Village, that he lived in and had familiarity with. His publisher at the time wanted him to write about an area of England for just a set of books that they wanted to produce. It was Penguin. And he said, I don't really know anything, but he went on a walk and he met someone who had been the nurse who delivered him, who was definitely the medical expert in their very small community. And she was in her 90s, and they got to talking. And he thought he knew her because he talked to her about the things that was going on with his family's health and his health. But guess what? He didn't. There was a lot more to know. So this is a tremendously well-regarded book, written in the 60s, I think, and has gotten reviewers from some of my favorite authors to praise it. Jan Morris, one of my very favorite writers, talks about this as being an oral history that you will never forget. And interesting enough, a generation later, Akenfield returned to Akenfield, Portrait of an English Village in the 21st Century. So a generation later, Craig Taylor goes back to the Suffolk area in England and writes about everyday people, ordinary lives there. And look at the people who loved on this book. I think this is 2015. Robert McFarlane, a gentle, subtle, and absorbing book, the most complex and supple account of modern rural life that I have ever read. Unbelievable. William Trevor, who I just admire so much, and as is wont, so short, I enjoyed it enormously. From him, that's all you need to know. So this is a set of books I'm really excited to immerse in. And a slower paced book doesn't mean that you have to read it all the way through. I often intersperse it with things that are going to be quicker paced. And so moving on to, I guess I should talk about locations being bookstores. Carrie, my colleague, absolutely can't stop reading about fiction set in either libraries or bookstores. And I'm actually not as into that. I do like it, and I do love this Bookman's Tale, also by Ronald Blythe, who wrote Akenfield, because I'm curious about his take. But I met my friend Annie, who's a professional cellist, in my bookstore. And I had recommended to her, based on what she was in the mood to read, something called Musical Chairs. And a cellist is a character, it is fiction. And she really got annoyed by how wrong some of the references were. And I totally get that. And I feel a little bit that way when I'm reading about bookstores, but just because I've owned one for 10 years. So bookstores is a place that a lot of people love. I know Carrie does. I'm more of a farm girl when I'm looking to escape my everyday life. Another thing that I count on for favorites is recommendations. And so Susan Shorney, who has been with me from the beginning, almost with the bookstore, recommended this series of very short reads. And it's called, I think, New Direction. And so this is The English Understand Wool by Helen DeWitt. It's absolutely in that wry drollery of a British voice. And I've read it. It's extremely short, but you will laugh after every thing. Sorry. There's a really short one I wanted to read out loud to you. But anyway, in her way, she is absolutely hilarious and definitely poking fun at the way British think they're great at everything. So, recommended. Recommended by my favorite pleasing read pal, Wendy. I think it was you, Wendy. Someone Else's Bucket List. Just a very pleasant, outgoing sister is cancer-stricken and passes away in the first page or two. And her sister, who is much more introverted, decides to finish her bucket list. And I've heard great things about it. Thank you, Wendy. Lisa Seymour, also super important to the history of Prairie Path books, recommended this one, Every Man a Hero, in Goodreads. And I have no friends in Goodreads other than Lisa and Wendy. So if you want to be my friend, reach out to me. I can't wait to read this one. D-Day Survivor. We get to learn about Ray Lampert. She loved it. I'm going to read it too. I have a lot of friends who will read anything about expatriates in France, and this one came highly recommended to me. So I'm going to give a read to this. Favorite authors. We just read everything, don't we, by our favorite people. And within our favorite author, we have our favorites of our favorite authors, right? So How Did I Miss? Lori Frankel's one of my favorites. This is probably her most famous and well-regarded book. This is How It Always Is. Where have I been? I came to her late, and now I'm going to circle back. Goodbye for Now, another Lori Frankel, which I haven't read. So this falls into favorite author. Similar favorite author, Maggie Shipstead. I really like The Great Circle. And Astonish Me is one that I haven't read. Again, I'm circling back on my Sandy, where have you been? What have you been reading? Favorite contemporary voice by far, Dolly Alderton writes about what it's like to be in your 20s and 30s, often from a relationship perspective, and I just can't get enough. I feel, again, like I am connecting. I really feel how other people feel that are living different experiences than myself. Number one thing that I look for. Then new cookbook, again, reviewed by a favorite, Ina Garten. I love reading cookbooks because they're a favorite. They allow me to escape for whatever, sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes an hour or two, just getting away from everything, certainly my phone, and, whatever, a rural nonfiction that I want to break from just because I want something a little bit more pacey, and I can get inspired by a cookbook. Favorite genre of mine. And then it's National Poetry Month. It's April. And one of my favorite authors in the whole world, Jim Harrison, has books of poetry. He writes everything, which is astonishing. And but I find him, sometimes I'm in the mood, sometimes not. Again, within my favorite author, there are favorite books by Jim Harrison. It's never easy, is it? And so I love this Braided Creek that he wrote, really very small 3 and 4 line poems, and they alternated back and forth. One would write this to the other, and the other would respond in this way. So it's a great read. And I found this one that made me think of the sleety weather today. Raindrops on your glasses. There you go again, reading the clouds. Since I wear glasses, I can really relate. Jim Harrison and Ted Kooser. And then later on, I'm going to introduce you to, speaking of favorite people, favorite authors pointing me in a direction, Wood Smoke by Wayne Caldwell is a book of poetry set in Appalachia, where our author is from. And again, when I read the back of it, I knew I needed to read it. I've never lived in Appalachia. I've been there. I like bluegrass, but that's about as connected as I am. And so look at this. Charles Frazier went crazy for this book. He wrote Cold Mountain. If you've been around me for the last year, you know that Ron Rash is one of my favorite contemporary authors. And Fred Chappell is somebody who I started reading because of other people recommending him. So I'm going to read later on a poem from this that really has grabbed me and made me think long after I closed the book. And again, it is my number one thing. What does it feel like to be anyone other than ourselves? That's my number one factor for being a favorite. So if you want any of these books, shop with us in person or bookshop.org. Thanks, guys.